Hello and welcome to this short tutorial where I'll explain to you how you can customize the SEMinR plots to your liking, and I'm recording this video as a quick fix to help everyone get around a SEMinR plot theming, and I'll first demonstrate this in our studio how we're actually doing this. So this is a model that's kind of like the basic model that we also show on our on the README file of the SEMinR package on GitHub. So we load the SEMinR library, we have these basic measurements, and we have these basic structures that we define, and this is kind of like how you would start your model anyways. And this is the first time you can actually generate your first meaningful plot, is if you use the specify model function and you add your measurements to the measurement model and your structure to the structural model, and you can from this generate a hypothesis. You can then plot the hypothesis, and the hypothesis plot is kind of like a plot of your hypothesized model without any data added to it. So this is kind of what you've generated from this model. It has a reflective construct image, it has the composite constructs, which are then shown by hexagons, and it has 4 relationships. Interestingly, you can also just plot the latent variables by going into plot structure, which will only give you the latent variables but not the manifest variables. And you could use this if you want to demonstrate what you're actually looking into without looking into how it's going to be measured. A downside of this is that you lose the information about what type of constructs you have, because they are obviously stored in the measurement model, and this is not generated if you just plot the structure. So what we typically do next is we estimate our model, and in this case it works fine, and we can now plot our first PLS model. And this is the image that you've probably seen on the GitHub repository, where you have in addition to the arrows, you have in here beta variables, and you have lambda variables here, and you have W for the weights for this variable here. And the next thing we would typically do is try, if we are confident with the model, that we bootstrap the model to identify whether any of the paths are significant or not. And yeah, even though I'm using a fast computer, this may take a few seconds, and it's done. So this was 1000 bootstrapping samples using 2 of my CPU cores. And if I now plot this boot estimates, we get an updated plot where we get hints towards the confidence intervals, the 95% confidence intervals, but also hints towards the levels of significance, here denoted in asterisks. And all of that can be edited, and one thing that I will show you now is the browse plot function. If you use the model and put it into the browse plot function, this will open up a browser, on my case Safari, and it will load the plot that you've just generated into the e.or editor. And this is basically what SEMinR uses as a plotting backend. It uses GraphViz, and this is the model description in GraphViz format, and you can go in here and edit anything. This might not be the best way to do something in here, but what you can do is, for example, in here, this is the structural model. If you want the structural model to have a bit bigger font size, you can go in here and do 16, and now all these constructs will have size 16. The downside of this is that you have to also edit the height and the width, and so this is more like fine adjustments when you think you want to move things around a little bit. The layout cannot be changed directly, and this is something that GraphViz does on its own. So the best way of trying to figure out where to move something is either by going into the widths or the weights of the individual connections in here. The benefit of this is that you can now download this as an SVG image, as a PNG, or as the source, and you can edit it afterwards, and you can store it somewhere, you can reuse it somewhere. And this would be one way of editing it if you just want to do minor adjustments. If you're an expert in GraphViz, obviously you can use this to edit it to your heart's content. But that's not the main thing that I want to show you. The other thing that I want to show you, and is probably the most asked thing on all our forums, is how to do theming. And SEMinR comes with a bunch of default themes. So if you have, we now generate this THM variable, which is shorthand for the theme. And if you start using SEMinR theme, then you get all the theming functions. This here generates the default theme that you already see, and we can also do like a dark theme. If you want to do something on a website that has dark background, you can then plot this dark theme, which is kind of like a basic dark theme. And if you're happy with your theme, if you want to use the dark theme from now on, you can call the SEMinR theme set function, and this will now use the theme in all of your plots. If you don't call the theme set function, you have to supply the theme to the plotting function as a parameter. Otherwise, you will not get the themed plot. And if I do now this, you see that we don't have to supply the theme to the plotting function and still get the dark theme. If you want to go back to normal, you can still call the SEMinR theme set function and use the SEMinR theme default in here, and this will now generate regular themes. So what are the other themes that are available? So let's have a quick look. If you want to use SEMinR theme Smart, which is a theme that is kind of leaning toward what you might get from other software, you will get a, you have to submit it, so you have to add the parameter here. So theme is THM, and if I now set THM to the theme Smart, you will now get a plot that might remind you of another software that uses blue for latent constructs and yellow for manifest variables. But how do you create your own theme if you want to change things on your own? The most easy thing would be to do this SEMinR theme create function, and the SEMinR theme create now has, if you do the autocomplete, it gives you all the parameters, and the help will now tell you what you can do with that. In this case, for example, if you want to change the amount of decimals that you have for each variable, you can change that to 2, for example. You can, if for some reason the Greek UTF-8 symbols do not work for you, which we've seen to be a problem on Windows computers, you can turn them off by doing false. And if you do that, and then I'll just copy this line because it's basically the same. If you do that here, you now get a empty theme without the special characters. It just says lambda and beta in here. And if you want to have them in there, one way of trying this out is also by going into the browse plot and then changing the characters in the editor directly, and see whether you can get a lambda or a beta value in there as well. So one way of doing this would obviously be to test all the different things that are here, but some of them are not easily understood immediately. So for example, if I go into, so the naming scheme for this is, plot is so any variable that starts with plot dot is what is associated with the overall plot. So this should affect everything in the plot. Anything that starts with are the are aspects of the measurement model, so you can change the node color for the measurement model. Anything that starts with SM are things that are associated with the structural model, so you can now here change the color of the nodes of the structural model. And the second part here, edge or node, means you can style the node, which for the measurement model would be this little thing here, or you can style the edge, which would be the arrow going towards or from the individual variable. And after that, you should see that there's tons of different things that you can adjust. One thing that has been asked frequently is, how do I change the hexagons into circles? And that can be done by going into the construct variable. So by changing construct.reflective.shape into something like hexagon, you can change the shape of all the reflective variables into a hexagon. And you can also change the type of arrows that you have going backward or forward. And you can also change the shape for both composite A and composite B constructs. And I think the last 3 ones here, they are related to the shapes of the manifest variables, because you can also adjust these shapes here for the individual construct, depending on whether they're reflective, composite, or composite B. If you feel that this is kind of a lot of things to do that are hard to actually see what you're getting, we have a editor for the theme, which can help you generate a theme. And for that, you will need to install this editor, and it's still in development, so please be aware that this might be a little bit complicated. What you need to do is you need to go to SEMinR Studio in the SEMinR GitHub page, and then you will see I just pushed some changes, so they haven't been pushed to master yet, but these are just minor edits. So yeah, you should no longer see this error here after I merge them in. This is what you want to copy, the direct install from GitHub. The CRAN install doesn't work yet because we haven't submitted to CRAN yet. And if you then go back to our studio and you run this code that I copied here in the console, you will install SEMinR Studio. And in this case, it will skip the install because I already have it installed in it. I don't want to force reinstallation. And if you've done that, you should run it once, or at least initialize it by calling SEMinR Studio. And you can then basically, it should appear in your add-ins. And down here is the create a custom theme function for SEMinR Studio. If you don't see that, one way of making sure that you can see it is by restarting your R environment or even restarting R Studio. And if the installation went well, you should see the create a custom theme in here. If you click on that, you get the SEMinR theme builder. And this takes a while to load, but you can see now it has fully loaded. And this is one model, and it's kind of designed in a lengthy way so that it fits the window, and this is where you can edit things. You can add a plot title. This is my plot, and you can then change things, like if you want to change the color of this, you can pick maybe aquamarine. You can change the font size of this if this needs to be bigger, and you can even change the font name. Be careful though, these are fonts that need to be installed on your machine, and if it doesn't work, I think the fallback would be Arial, I guess. But I haven't tried this out too much, so I'll just stick with Helvetica. No, I think Times New Roman is probably the default. And the font will be applied to all of the plot. You can change the rounding of the variables. If you just want to see 2 digits, you can go down to 2. And another thing that you can do is, if you change the splines, then in this case, the lines will all be straight lines, but you might want to have splines, so these are now curved lines, trying to find a better path from the nodes that they're connecting. By activating the randomized weights set, you will add very little tiny weights to these arrows, and they will be different every time you plot. So if you now call the plotting function again, you might see slightly different variations of the same plot. And the benefit of that is that you might get a layout that matches your preferences more than in the previous runs. And you can also change the background. You can say, okay, let's plot that all on this orangey blanched almond color. Down here, you can now go into the construct settings. You can change the node fill, the font size, the label font color. You can change the height to width ratio. So if you say the plots should be higher, then they should be wide. Does this? Oh wait, since these are ellipses, I'm not really sure this does what I think it does, but I think it changes the bounding box for the structural model. Does this do anything? Apparently not. So yeah, it's still in development, and some of the things might not work, and so just try to figure out if it works for you, and if something doesn't do anything, then ignore it basically. So the thing is, inside of each node, there is more than just a label in here. For example, we have expectation and we have an R² value. And we have 2 different templates for showing endogenous and exogenous variables. And these are in here. And this basically means B is for bold, give the name in bold. then have a break into the new line and then change the font point size down to 10. And the R string is the string that contains the R squared in the next line. And this is probably something that you will have to look for in the documentation if you want to adjust this, because you can add stuff in here. For example, if I do ABC, then you will see that there's an ABC in front of the R square for all the endogenous variables. And obviously this is something where you can break stuff, so if you need to go back, it makes sense to cancel and start over again. Yeah, for the exogenous variables where there's not an R square, it doesn't make sense to have the R string in here. So in this case, it's just the name. And here we can also change between, if we want to have a box for the reflective shapes, a circle. Circles don't look too good, I would argue. Ellipses, I would say, look good. And we have hexagon, we also have pentagon. I don't know if that makes sense to you. But these are the shapes that are available. Octagon is also available. Oh, it's not available, not anymore. And I think a triangle is also available. So if you want to have a triangle in there, you now can. You can also change the arrow direction if that is something that annoys you. You can go from backward to forward for the reflective arrow, and now even the reflective constructs now have forward-facing arrows. And I don't know if that makes sense to you. Probably not, but at least that's something you can do. You can also, in this case, for a reflective construct, it uses lambda variables, so the factor loadings, but you can tell it to enforce weights of a composite model to show the composite weights. If that makes any sense to you, you can use this. And the same thing is true for composite type A and composite type B. You can change basically all the things that you want to change. You can change the arrows, you can change the shapes, you can change whether they should use weights or loadings in the visualization. And next thing you can do is change the path settings. So for the paths, you can change the color for all positive associations. So in this case, let's do something like dark blue. And we see that these are for the structural model, the positive color. And we can change the negative color to maybe something like this brown thing here. And we now see that the edge color of the negative association is now colored in brown 3. And we can change the edge style to all allowed values from GraphViz, which are, I think, solid is a thing, dashed is a thing, dotted is a thing, and probably there's more. And I don't know if you really want to change them, I would keep this as solid. You can also change the font size here if you want to make the font that is associated with what is written on next to the line. You can change that to a larger font. And you can now, because this is a bootstrap model, you can now change what you can see. So for example, if you agree with some other people that the t-test and the asterisks that are associated with the different p-value thresholds don't make a lot of sense, you can remove these stars here by deactivating the show p stars. You can also add the p-value to it. So in this case, you get a p smaller than .001 in this case. And you can also even add the t-value that was used to estimate this p-value. In this case, t is equal to 3.2, which indicates that this is a significant effect. I'm not going to do that. You could even decide to not show the confidence interval, so you will only get the beta value with the asterisks. You can even decide to not show this label at all, and then it will get removed. And here is also a template, and in this case, it makes sense to have a deeper look into it. The SEMedge.boot template means this is a template for the label of the edge for bootstrap models. And in this case, it says what variable are we looking into. In this case, it's at beta, and we could also have, I think, gamma paths in here. And then obviously this will be a gamma. And then we have the value, which is 0.06, and then the stars or the asterisks, new line. And then we have the font size of the lower line. In this case, it's 7, the CI value, the T value, the P value, And if you don't show them, then this will just basically be empty and it will not show up here. You can change or adjust the width of the arrows in between these constructs by determining the and this is basically a linear regression. It has an offset and the size of the parameter is the coefficient of the linear regression. And you can basically say we have an offset, which is like the smallest line that you can have. And if we make it thicker, then all the SM lines are going to be thicker. And the multiplier basically tells you the scaling. Larger effects will now have even wider lines in this model. And another thing that you can change is the minimum length of this arrow. So if you want to put all the constructs further away, you can go up to 2, and then these lines will be twice as long and everything will be moved out a little bit. And this is now length 1, and this is how you can adjust the lengths between the paths of the manifest and the structural variables. Obviously, you can do the same for the measurement model. In this case, the color here is, the node color is gray, the font is black, and you can change the different shapes. Typically, we all use boxes here, but yeah, you can change that if you would like to. And the same is true for the loadings, which is these arrows in here. You can also change the style of the loadings. So in this case, the negative ones are dashed, the positive ones are solid, both of them are dim gray. All of them use font size 7. You can decide not to show the labels. I don't know why you would want to do that. And you can change the linear regression coefficients for how this line here is determined. And obviously here you can also add whether or not you want to show the different values, because for these we also estimate t values and p values if it makes sense. So it seems to be only the case in here for the for these two variables. I'm not sure why it's not showing in here. So yeah, don't rely on it to work perfectly. I think there might be a reason why it's not working here. And what this does, it generates theme code for you. So basically what you can now do is you can copy all this and put that into a theme variable, and then you have your theme. And if you store that somewhere safe, you can use it over and over again. And you can also do here copy clipboard. I'm not sure if that works on all machines, but if it does, the thing that you now need to do is do theme, put it in there. And if I now do plot my PLS model and run this with this theme, you should now see that the theme now looks like what I generated in my theme editor from the SEMinR Studio plugin. I hope that was kind of helpful, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in our Facebook group. I'll hope to answer them as soon as possible.